All right, so we are now standing in an unburned plot. So this is a comparison to our Stoddard plots, which have, the fire return intervals from annual to 75 years. So this has not been burned since 1960. As you can see, we are standing in a closed canopy forest. There is no herbaceous ground cover that I can see. There are vines, there are lots of woody oaks and myrica. There are some relic pines. I don't see any pine regeneration in this plot. It's a lot of hardwood leaf litter.
Yeah, so this is what happened. This is what a lot of the Southeast looks like now because of fire exclusion. So this might be the most familiar forest type to a lot of people that come to the region. But historically, it was actually relatively uncommon, at least up in these uplands here, where fire would sweep across the landscape, either started by lightning in the early summer or late spring, or by indigenous people who were burning, followed by colonists who burned. So we actually had to protect this area from fire coming in at tall timbers where we burn everything else so frequently, to have it become this, just to be sure that the similar habitat that we see in other places in the South probably used to be a frequently burned open grassy pine savanna, just like this used to be. A lot of the species that are here are typical of old field vegetation. So there's water oak and sweet gum, laurel oak, live oak, these kinds of species that used to grow only in the bottomlands where they were protected by fire, more associated with like rivers and drains and such. But they were able to come up in the upland originally because of tilling, because of the farming, and the abandonment of the farming allowed these species to come in the uplands, and then were top killed like we saw at the other plots by frequent fire. But then when the fire stopped, they are allowed to grow up and become a closed canopy hardwood forest. So this is an example of what they call mesification, which is just a fancy word for what used to be an open grassy pine savanna turning into a more mesophytic environment, meaning that it's shady, it's moister. The vegetation that's here is more typical of what was mesophytic habitats or moisture, wetter habitats that were limited to the bottomlands in the past that are now beginning to dominate in the uplands. There's still pine trees in this habitat that were left over from the time when the frequent fires were occurring, but similar to the 3-year plots, there's no pine regeneration in this community. Now, one challenge is turning this kind of habitat back into an open pine savanna for wildlife habitat. And the reason that's a challenge is that the pine trees, like this one behind me right here, tend to accumulate a lot of duff at their base, mostly because of the bark sloughing off. And when that duff accumulates over time, if it's too dry when you put a fire in there, then it can actually burn that duff up and kill the pine tree. So even though this tree might be able to survive fire from fire hitting it, hitting its thick bark here, it might actually be killed by just the smoldering combustion, more like a charcoal at the bottom of the tree that can girdle it. So when we try to bring fire back into the system, we have to be really careful to do it under conditions where this duff at the base of the tree is really wet. So we're just burning the top of it off and then doing that over and over again. And it's usually a pretty long-term process.
Yeah, I would say that in addition to changing the vegetation, we've also changed the wildlife habitat and just the wildlife communities that lives in this area. So the bird community has completely changed. We've lost the Bachman sparrows, the red-cockaded woodpeckers. They no longer live here, but now you'll see things that are more typical of something that you see in your yard, like a mockingbird. We no longer have the fox squirrels here, but now we have gray squirrels. And so you really have a different vegetation community, you have a very different wildlife community in this kind of habitat.
It's not that we don't care about those kinds of animals, but like Cinnamon said, they're just not very rare. So they're not the ones that we're most concerned about. They're pretty common throughout the landscape, whereas that frequently burned habitat has become pretty rare because of the lack of fire. And that's for lots of reasons. People just having other priorities of what to do with the land. There's certain challenges to burning. Maybe people don't feel comfortable doing it, don't have the expertise. Maybe they're concerned about liability. There's some concerns about smoke. But we're trying to, meet most of those challenges in various ways by having training programs for private landowners to learn how to burn their property. The Tall Timbers Research Station has a private lands burn team that goes and helps people learn how to burn on their property. There are new prescribed burn associations where different private landowners get together to help each other burn. So the different ways that we're trying to see more and more habitat come back like it was historically, so we can continue to have habitat for these species that have become imperiled and rare in the future, and maybe those populations can build back up again.